Hello, and this is my presentation on the Poisonwood Bible. My name is Charlie Juarez. I am a freshman at California Baptist University taking Introduction to Literature, and it is my pleasure to execute my chosen work of literature, which is the Poisonwood Bible. So the first part of my presentation is going to be literature of choice and why I chose this story. The Poisonwood Bible is one of the most iconic pieces in literature, having the characteristics of being character-driven, having multiple complex themes throughout the story, and that it does not follow a simple formula. On the topic of being character-driven, the story follows the narratives of the five main characters: Orleana Price, Rachel Price, Leah Price, Ada Price, and Ruth Mae Price. Orleana is the mom, and Rachel, Leah, Ada, and Ruth Mae are her daughters. Rachel being the oldest, Leah and Ada being the middle twins, and Ruth Mae being the youngest. The father, Nathan Price, does not have his own narrative. Some of the many themes explored would be women and sexism, growth, imperialism, religion, culture, and many more to choose from. The book centers its narrative on the women of the family, shows the sexism that happens to women at the time and through many cultures. The book explores the difference in cultures. The story begins with the family in America, and most of the book is spent in the Congo. There is obviously going to be some difference culture-wise, but the way that the Price family grows in their new environment happens quite differently depending on the family member. Let's start by going through each narrative and trying to establish their roles in the overall story and the themes. Starting off with Orleana Price, the mother, the head of all that is going on, the caregiver, and the loyal wife. She is the minister's wife and goes along with anything he says. Although she takes on the submissive role, she did not always start out this way. It was her husband, Nathan Price, that changed her. She then grows into a woman who stands up for herself and her kids by leaving him behind after the whole incident happened and took Ada with her back to America. Her real turning point was when her youngest, Ruth Mae, dies. Next up is Rachel Price. She is the oldest out of the Price children and has the oldest child syndrome. At the start of the story, she is 15 and has her mind set on keeping her culture and trying not to let the Congo affect her in any way, shape, or form. The reason for this is partially due to her age and partially due to her upbringing. She is this American teenager being brought into a new culture and knowing nothing, so she doesn't need to change and should try and embrace the culture that is around her. Out of the Price children, she is the most stagnant who is alive. The next character would be Leah Price. She is one half of the Price twins and starts off the story with being the perfect child. I say perfect child in quotes because, as we all know, there is no such thing as a perfect child. She begins the story being this very wholesome little girl who idolizes her father and wants to be just like him. Later, she turns her idolization from her father to her husband, Anatoly, due to her exposure to the injustice and suffering that goes on in the Congo. Next up is the other Price twin, Ada Price. At the beginning of the book, she is described as the complete opposite of Leah. She has a disability and seems to have the opposite view on life, having more of a skeptic point of view. Later in the book, she sheds these characteristics a little bit, but puts her faith into science and becomes a researcher. Lastly, we look at the youngest Price child, Ruth Mae Price. When the story starts, she is 5 years old and seeing everything through a very different perspective than her sisters and her mother. She is the very youngest and very much shows it in her narratives. She's a little too young to see the reality around her, but unfortunately, she does not have the opportunity to grow out of this due to her untimely death by a snake bite. She doesn't lose her innocence in the traditional manner, but she keeps it till her untimely death. The next part of my presentation is going to be about the definition of literature. So the qualities of literature can make any piece of work considered literature. But what is literature? What defines a book as literature? For the definition, we will look at the introduction slides to the class, saying, quote, simply put, literature represents the culture and tradition of a language or of people. The concept is difficult to precisely define, though many have tried. It's clear that the accepted definition of literature is constantly changing and evolving, end quote. This definition to me is the most correct due to the implication that it speaks to a variety of people regarding the context and does not stray away that there are many forms of literature. In my example, it follows the traditional literature in the sense that it is a book, but the Poisonwood Bible really spoke to its time and what was going on in the Congo at the time, while also giving it another audience and exposure to family trouble elements. Next up in my presentation, we're going to talk about the background of Barbara Kingsolver. The author of the Poisonwood Bible is Barbara Kingsolver. She was born in Annapolis, Maryland, and has let it influence her writing a lot. Regarding the Poisonwood Bible, her family and herself lived in Central Africa in 1962 for her father to practice medicine and make a real difference in people's lives. He actually chose this place because he thought it would make more of a difference in people's lives. She modeled her experience into her novel, and she has always wanted her writing to change the world and to bring awareness to social issues and human injustices. The next part of my presentation will be the analysis of the work. We're going to start off with literary types. This novel is a literary fiction piece. Regarding those standards, it fits well by having the fictional element and using fictional characters and storyline. The place may be real, but it is still a piece of fiction. The next is the genre. The genre could be described as historical women fiction. The story takes place in the Kalanga village in 1959. During this time, there was a lot of political warfare due to the colonization of the Congo. The Congolese wanted independence, so in extension, the book was based around this. Characteristics idiosyncratic to the work. The defining details in Kingsolver's work is that she uses her own personal experience in some of the book. When she lived in Central Africa, she had very long hair that other children of the village would pull because they had never seen such long hair before. Kingsolver added this experience to one of the characters' Rachel Price's story. She adds her own experience and perspective in her book and really makes it her own. Next, we're going to talk about literary terms. The story is based on each family member's point of view of the events that happen. Kingsolver does an amazing job in getting that across, as the book jumps from character to character and the reader really feels that coming through. Each character has their own personality, and that really shines through to the reader and makes them feel as though they are in the body of said character. She does a great job developing these characters. Theoretic lens. For this section, we are going to try and use psychoanalytic criticism, diving into how Kingsolver pretty much used her inner emotions to portray the different family members' point of view. Her experiences and emotions were represented through the different family members. She was young like Ruth May, intelligent like Leah, an outcast like Ada, and a little closed-minded like Rachel. Although these are very basic characteristics to these characters, she is represented through all of them. Influence on other forms of art. As far as research is concerned, there has not been any works that are influenced by the Poisonwood Bible, but there has been speculation of an HBO adaptation coming out soon, starring and produced by Amy Adams. The next part of my presentation is going to be my personal response. Overall, the Poisonwood Bible is a great piece of literature that touches on the political warfare in the Republic of the Congo at the time. Kingsolver does an excellent job at developing the characters to make the different points of views unique and fresh for a plethora of generations to come. The themes and lessons speak to plenty of people and help people to relate, even if it is not the same way as moving to a whole new continent. Each character is an opportunity for the reader to relate. The Poisonwood Bible is a great example of literature that speaks to older and newer generations to come. And that is my presentation. Thank you so much.